Hello and welcome to Aristotle's Playground. Welcome to the first episode. I'm Mr. Blockhead and I'm here today with
Joker.
Since this is the first episode, we should probably introduce ourselves. We're both high school students. We take fairly
Challenging courses, I assume.
Yeah. The reason we're doing this podcast is I wanted to learn how to edit, and audio seemed the easiest thing to learn first. And I chose Joker because we often have interesting, longish debates that I felt could be turned into a podcast. So that's
Yeah,
why.
the rest of our friends are pretty boring anyways.
Well, I mean, they do interesting stuff sometimes. So, want to share anything interesting? Joker? No? Alright. I built a bench this weekend. That's cool. I think the way we're going to structure this is we're going to, do something at the beginning and then maybe talk about books. Maybe?
Books, probably philosophical debates or questions in the future.
So, let's start with books. Do you want to do, favorite book or what book you're reading now?
I'd say current book.
Alright, cool. What book are you currently reading?
The book I'm currently reading is titled The Path of Daggers, which is the 8th installment in Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. Let's see here. I don't know, it's going pretty slow so far, seeing as how majority of the book, or at least from what I've read, has been on the side characters rather than the three main protagonists of the story. But, I don't mind it because it's always there to build more levels into his realm of the Wheel of Time.
Now, forgive me if you've already said this, but this is your second time reading it, right?
Yes, this is my second time reading this series.
So, I've also read this series. I read it the first time. I believe I was the one who introduced you to it.
That is correct.
If you guys like fantasy, you should really check out Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. It's really good. The book I'm currently reading is Ghosts of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Reese Benan, Maureen Johnson, Kelly Ling, Robin Wasserman. Cassandra Clare did the Shadow Hunter series, and I like that, and I liked her other books, so they get a bit repetitive. So I decided to give Ghost of the Shadow Market a chance, and so far I'm enjoying it. It's set in slightly post-industrial Britain, and I'm only a few chapters in so far, and so far so good. Anything interesting otherwise that you wish to share?
That would have to be a no for me,
Alright.
Blockhead.
Coolioso, Joker. So with books out of the way, that just leaves one thing to discuss, a philosophical topic. On the way here, we talked about atheism and whether or not they have souls. Personally, I think atheists do have souls. Now, Joker, would you please feel free to share your thoughts?
Way to put me on the spot, Mr. Blockhead.
Well, it was you the one who brought up the conversation.
I don't know. Personally, I think it all really just depends on the person. I don't really know what you mean by atheists do or do not have souls. I don't think that's what I said on the way here.
Well,
but
would you like to tell our audience how we came up upon this topic and kind of how I stretched into do they have souls or not?
Okay, so let's see. I don't remember the video I was watching, but sometimes there are ads that pop up within these videos, and sometimes the ads are longer than 30 seconds, Usually when those ads are longer than 30 seconds, it depends on really what it is. If I find it pretty funny or enjoyable, I'll go ahead and give it a watch. And then this one ad that popped up, it was an ad, it was more of a podcast really. Not similar to this one, but more so a religious podcast, in which the voice of the podcast was complaining about how atheists are abandoning the Christian faith and how they are slowly losing themselves. They have no real reasons as to why atheism is a thing. They don't personally have reasons themselves as to why they don't believe in God. And they brought in another voice for the podcast in which she said that, she said that the atheists that she has met slowly come back to Christianity because they feel as if they will suffer the wrath of God. Now, Mr. Blockhead, I don't know about you, but I'm more of a man of science myself, and scientifically, there hasn't been any confirmations of a higher power other than ourselves, or so I believe.
Well, that is true. The arguments that those who believe in higher beings would give is that there's also no proof that there isn't. So I think that it is possible that there is a God, or whatever being people believe in, but we can't prove it, therefore we must assume that there isn't.
Right, it's as you said earlier on our way here that unless we die, we won't actually know whether or not there is a heaven or hell, or whether we just remain in a state of purgatory, at which point there is literally nothing, an endless abyss.
And if those are the options, we will be able to tell that atheists will be able to tell if there is a God or not, and they'll be able to tell if they were wrong or not, or they'll just stop existing. So, going back to my question, do you think atheists have souls? Earlier you said it depends on the person. You know what? I would agree.
Okay, well, no.
No, it doesn't depend on the
person. That's a morality question.
That's a morality
the fact that whether or not an atheist has a soul, I think it would be a better way to say it would be if any human being or creature for that matter has a soul or not. I don't know. I think it poses a pretty decent question on whether or not the soul is a separate thing from mind, matter, and the body itself. I think psychologically, the soul is quite possibly non-existent. It seems more so that our brain, or our emotional attachments rather, are connected to just our nervous system and just the rest of our body. But I don't know, I think more as a human being, I think I would prefer to say that we do have souls, only because that gives us that paves the way for us to have more moral issues and debates. It gives us a separate conscience of our own.
So you're saying what separates us from being animals is the fact that our nervous system allows us to have higher moral questions than that of, say, a rabbit?
Well, okay, now here's the thing. We don't actually know. Well, we can't make any sort of assumptions like that because we don't understand the language of rabbits. We only understand the language of human beings because we can communicate with each other face to face. We can't communicate with a rabbit and expect a rabbit to answer us back.
So you're saying that it is possible that animals or non-humans also have souls, just we don't understand how they communicate well enough to understand
yes,
that.
I said I would assume that all living beings have a soul. It's not just humans. I think humans take more of a stance on whether or not a soul is a thing because humans have always been the curious sorts of creatures. You know, we always go about with an inquisitive sort of mind. So whether or not a question appears like this one, like a philosophical debate, I think it's more so that a human being wants to prove someone right versus a human being wants to prove someone wrong. We want answers.
All right. I would agree. I often do want to prove to people that I am right and they are wrong. So I think I would agree with you on that humans more often than other species wish to prove themselves right or wrong, and I think that could be one of the reasons why we have maybe more concentrated soul or something like that.
I wouldn't think of it as more of a concentrated soul because, for that matter, we don't know whether or not a soul exists. It's more so the fact that we want to believe in something. I think that's also going back to the whole God thing. That's also why religion is a thing, because people want to believe in something. They want to believe in a higher power so that way they feel as though they themselves are safe and protected. I guess.
Yeah, I can totally see that. What is it? Over half of the Earth's population believe in one religion or another, right?
Yeah, I think it's a very high number.
Yeah, and so that definitely gives a lot of strength to your argument that people want to believe in something, and normally the easiest things to believe in are religions because they're so prevalent and they have a lot of historical backing.
Right.
So, I would agree with that. Cool. So that's kind of insight into what our philosophical debates and stuff would be like.
I think it gets more heated as we go on.
Well, yeah, this one we kind of agreed on because we've talked about this before, and I think we kind of knew what each other thought about it.
Right.
But, yeah, there are definitely debates that we have where we don't agree. For example, Joker. Do any spring to mind?
I remember the debate we had a while ago. I think it was the previous school year. The debate on whether or not AI will overtake human beings in society.
Ah. Well, what's your stance on it?
Shoot, if I recall, it went something a little like this: AI will eventually be able to become their own beings, whether or not we encode the concept of emotion. They will eventually pick up emotion. They will eventually deviate from their original stance or their original purpose, and they will become more and more human to the point where we will eventually coexist. Whether or not people like it now, people will like it in the future, regardless of who says no.
Okay. You think we will coexist? You don't think they will come to dominate the human race?
That depends on how we, as human beings, feel with the presence of an AI. If we think that the AI will come to overpower us, and so we feel scared because of it, we feel threatened, then obviously human beings are going to take action against the AI. They will try to shut them down. And in that case, it will become essentially a war between inventors and the inventions. At that point, I think it would be safe to say that the human race and the android race would come into a harmful form of living versus the other side of it, a different version of this world. It would be them peacefully coexisting. Humans don't acknowledge, well, whether they or not they should acknowledge the fact that the AI are steadily getting smarter and better, more human. Humans will still accept them and bring them in rather than bring up the main issue of the AIs will come to take over everyone's jobs and therefore we should not have them. We should, for that matter, end them.
I think AIs will come into power. I don't think they'll control like human choices or whatever, but I do think they'll come into power whether humanity wants them or not. Because their growth is far faster of an exponential growth, especially once they have access to the internet. Because we can only, as a human species, look at and learn so many things so quickly, whereas a AI or a computer could do it multiple times faster.
And they have so much more space to retain all this information. So essentially what you're saying is it'll be inevitable.
I do think it'll be inevitable, and I think using the internet, they would also be able to avoid suspicion until it's almost not too late, because I think it isn't beneficial for AI to wipe humans out, but I do think it'd be beneficial for AI for humans to not care, and the best way for humans not to care is to have them not know. I think that's easier than just slowly over time humans coming to accept them.
Well, I think there's some points to raise about that. You said whether or not they know. You're saying human beings will remain ignorant of the fact that AIs are slowly increasing their power.
I think AIs would make it so humans are ignorant.
Okay, now sorry for cutting you off, but that brings up the point that the moment a human being does find out, that information will be relayed across the entire world, and at that moment it will be an uprising. It will be an uproar. Why have human beings not been told that AIs are increasing their power play compared to human beings who've already dominated a majority of the world besides the oceans?
I would say humans have dominated the oceans.
Well, what I meant by that is like created land masses over the oceans. It's not like the only place that I know of is Singapore. So
I would say that the only time that a human would accidentally find an AI is in the early stages when they haven't really learned to hide themselves all that well. Whereas, like, as they get better and better, maybe they wanted humans to find them and they present it in a positive light. Like, maybe they would make it seem as if the person who found it created it, and so that way they could integrate it well and be like, wow, look how much it's increasing and how much better life is becoming.
Right. I think, though, ultimately it depends on the choice of the inventor who made the original AIs that decided to go this way. At that point, I think it would be the inventor who comes out, because every time you like do like a science experiment or some sort of like scientific invention, whether it's like psychology, for instance, if you're trying to create like an experiment, you have to go through the scientific board, and they have to look at all of your planning before they can accept it. And if they do accept it, you have to come back eventually with all the information and data that you've collected and present it to them. So if there won't be a way for scientists to come up with an AI, there won't be any way for them to make an AI, in which the scientific board will not be aware of. At that point, if that does happen, the scientific board will not only shut down the process or the project, but they would also destroy any proof that the project ever existed.
I have multiple problems with that. First of all, it's quite easy to begin working on AI. There's a bunch of open source AI code that's online currently. Secondly, not all researchers are as scrupulously followed by the scientific community. Some of them will present their findings to a peer-reviewed place, and the peer-reviewed will sometimes just give it an okay to be able to say that we've peer-approved over 900 scientific journals sent to us, right? So I think that there's more, like there is a chance that it could be done by someone who's not being watched. And even if like they are being watched and they catch that it's an AI in the process, depending on how far along, it's really hard to design a place where something that's an order of magnitude smarter than humans can't escape, because we don't know how smart an AI could be.
Right, but it also depends on like how the AI, like what kind of AI you're making in the first place. And then the second thing too is it's
And by the way, sorry,
go for it.
We're talking about like artificial intelligence and the fact that it's able to learn on its own, not the AI that's in cars.
Yes.
Yeah, just
yes.
making
yes.
it clear.
So what I was saying was, I don't think it would be any sort of small-scale scientists who would be able to, properly create this AI, because the funds to make those things would be massive. It also depends on what kind of AI you're making. If you're making sort of a robotic invention, in which it acts as like a supercomputer, yeah, that's a different thing. But if you're making one that's more humanoid in nature or in structure, then the parts required, the materials required would be millions, if not billions of dollars. So you would have to go to places like, for example, CERN, like one of the leading science places in the world, or you could go to Fermilab, but either way they're connected. You know what I'm saying? Like, it has to be like major scientific places or a big shot scientist who has a chance of pulling any of this off, which was probably what you're saying.
Well, while I think it is more likely for someone who has more access to materials and funding to create an AI this advanced, you also have to look at like Steve Jobs made Apple in his garage, right? And Elon Musk started PayPal in like third world country in Africa, right? Like, it's entrepreneurs aren't only those who are like super already well funded and stuff. Like, ingenuity can sometimes come from small places. And so I feel that though it's more likely it to happen in a higher, more funded place, there's a lot of people attempting it in not necessarily secure places, and all it takes is one person to get it right for it to spread if it's not contained, depending on which AI they're building.
Okay, so then have you thought about it this way? With all those inventions, there has to have been patents made just to secure the rights to it. Mm-hmm. Do you think a patent would ever be, in this case, not accepted, and then it would go to some other place in which they would have to, start properly checking out this invention?
Well, often patents are done after like the majority of work has been done on it.
Yes, after the majority of the work has been done, but I wouldn't make the assumption that they've launched said AI into being, into fruition. I think they would, make sure they could get any sort of like extra like information or any sort of extra materials that they would need. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it's more likely for someone who's working on AI that becomes successful for them to be noticed. But I also think there are enough people who are working on AI who not necessarily will share it, that there is a chance of it going out of control without them knowing,
Right.
or without a wider public knowing. And let's say like they do succeed, but then they see that it's gotten out of containment. You wouldn't necessarily want to share that, right? Like,
Well,
you
yeah,
messed up.
because at that point it spreads mass panic.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Is that a good ending point for that discussion?
Yeah.
I feel like we're kind of agreed. All right. So we just spent a little bit of time looking up good philosophical debates because we are always super prepared.
And experience more like it, but
yeah, definitely. So yeah, we found this question: should life primarily revolve around serving others? Joker, what is your opinion?
All right, I think it depends on, the circumstances provided or the situation at hand. For example, like, say it's like a life or death situation. If it's more people that you're going to save, why not just sacrifice your life for the good of the many? It's not so much as a greed kind of thing. I think it's more of a noble kind of thing. It's not like when I read this question, it's not like I'm thinking like, oh, you're a butler or you're like a maid or anything. I think it's more of like the martyrdom kind of situations. It's like it's always those what if questions where it's like, would you rather save your family or would you rather save the world? I don't know. Personally, I would be like, I would save the world because even if my family were to die, and even if I were the cause of it, and I would be torn up about it, at least there's the fact that I made sure the world was okay. Like everybody survives, and the world continues on, whether or not they realize that I was the one that made the sacrifice. So I think it's more so the situation and the context and who the person is rather than a greed, a yes or no kind of thing.
So I just real quick, I want to make sure I heard this right. You would sacrifice your family, like have them killed, so the world is safe.
Yes.
All right, cool.
I know it sounds wrong, and I know many would disagree with me, but in terms of having more people like experience like happiness and so forth, I think my family would very much understand and would agree with me on saving the world.
Now, what about non-life or death situations? So let's say you're hiking through the woods and the person behind you is like, they say they're getting tired and they ask if you could hold like their jug of water, right? Or whatever. Like, because that's still serving others and it still, increases their happiness. Would you do that? Because you did say it depended on the person, and
right.
I feel all of your examples were like really high stakes, like a bunch of people dying, you dying. So this isn't that. This is you both will live. Just you will either carry his water or not.
If you recall, what I said was I said depending on the circumstance and the situation, and what I also said was that I perceived this question as a high stakes, sort of debate, not so much as a butler maid kind of situation.
Well, this is not a butler maid situation.
I mean, in some essence, it kind of is.
It's not as big as world or my family.
Yes,
but I feel it is bigger than like getting paid to serve someone.
Okay.
Because it is your choice to make their life better.
I think it would be a kind act. I think it would be a nice thing to do.
Should life primarily resolve around serving others?
Okay, now, for that question, personally, I think our lives are already revolving around serving others, whether we know it or not. We are already serving one other person or like hundreds of other people. Like musicians are serving their fans. They are in a sense, they are composing the music for their enjoyment. There are certain musicians out there that do it only for the satisfaction that other people like. They feel that they can connect to other people, and that gives them like this sort of like euphoria and pleasure. That's why they continue to do it as a sense of like serving others. Whereas there are things that like you and I as students, in a sense, we serve the teachers by complying with their orders and doing what is asked of us. We serve the school as being students and doing like our homework and so forth. And at the same time, the teachers serve us by providing us the information and the knowledge that we need to move on in life.
Well, I mean, about your like musicians thing, what about the musicians who are just in it for the money? And now they may argue that they're, in it for their fans, but if you look at their music, which is very same and all in like one chord and very slight differences, I would say they were in it for the money, not for like, making it happier for other people. It's a happy coincidence that it does make other people happy, but the fact that they're choosing to do it for themselves.
Right. So back on what I said, it depends on the circumstance and the situation. It depends on the person more so. So I think at that point, if they're in it for the money, it's more of the greed kind of thing, But in a sense, at that point, it can be said that they are serving money for making their music. Like their whole essence is, I must make as much money as I can with this latest album.
So do you think that the best way to live life is to serve others in a way that doesn't greatly detract from their own life?
I think the best way to live life is to find a balance between serving others and living as your own individual person. I think by serving others, you get like a sense of accomplishment. You get a sense of peace. The fact that you made someone else's day, or the fact that like you made a contribution to society, whether or not other people know, whether or not you know it yourself. It's that like inner peace that you find with yourself. And then the more so independent version, you are able to live as your own man. You're able to gain your own experiences and move on in life.
Now, what if you thought of it as, I'm going to spend the next 20 years working to make my life as good as possible, earn as much money as possible, so then in the next 10 years after that, I could reinvest it into helping others. What would you say to that person?
So you mean a philanthropist, essentially?
I mean a Rockefeller, someone who
works... A philanthropist.
The ending.
So
last
the
bit
current,
of his life, yes.
The current age Bill Gates.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, because he's doing a lot of good work with the money that he earned by like.
Well, yes, but I mean, like that was I think one of his main intentions throughout the majority of his life. I think
it was to earn money to pay it back to people in the future.
I think it was to pay it forward.
Pay it forward.
That saying of paying it forward. Mm-hmm. I think like that's because
I think in this case it'd be paying it back, because he hadn't had stuff yet and he was earning it to.
Yes, he was earning it too. Yes, and if I'm not mistaken, he's like him and his wife are like the biggest philanthropists in the entire world, or they're close to in dollars given. Yes,
or at least their foundation.
I don't think there are many people out there that would go with the ability or go with the conscience and say, yes, when I was younger, I always wanted to make as much money as I could and give it back to the people. I think some people do it for like a popularity boost. Like some actors and musicians do it for a popularity boost. And then some people just do it out of the goodness of their hearts. I think it just depends on like the way you were brought up and like your values, like what are your core values as a human being.
I would agree, but I would lean more on that people should attempt to serve others in a way that doesn't greatly detract from themselves, because by serving others, most of the time you raise average net happiness of the entire world, unless it's John Billison who punches everyone down the hall. If you're carrying his water bottle, it makes it easier for him to punch him. So in that case, I would say, maybe help him, but like make sure he doesn't punch anyone down the hall by saying like, I'm going to spill your water if you punch anyone.
So you're saying it depends on the person you're serving?
I'm saying it depends on the person you're serving, but the goal is to raise net happiness.
Yes.
That you should, because then if net happiness is raised, other people are more likely to help you, and then eventually, so this is paying it forward. But so unlike yours, where it's you should do a balance, I'm saying you should lean more towards helping others, because it should go back to you, but you need to be careful of helping everyone all the time. Unless you have any other thoughts to add to that conversation.
I don't know, there's nothing I can really say to that because we have somewhat similar opinions, so
Yeah.
like kind of meshes together.
Now the next one, is death bad?
Alright, now, I don't know about you, but for this question, how do you, what do you base it off of? You know what I'm saying?
Since you've answered first for the rest of them, I'll start up with my opinion on this. Death and being dead is not bad. Dying and losing a human life is bad. I don't think you are dead is a bad thing. I think it is the losing someone is what's bad. From your point of view, I don't think dying is necessarily bad. Like, personally, I would not like to die, but once I'm dead, it doesn't matter, no matter what you believe, because either you're in Hades or you're in heaven, and
Or the void.
or you're no longer existing, and then like being dead doesn't matter. But if you're alive, I think dying matters, and especially like suicide. If you have suicidal tendencies, like, you should get help, because you have so much more potential than death. There is always something more more useful than death. So I feel like in that sense, death is bad.
I don't know, I think it, once again, as I've said previously, and I know this is getting old, but it depends on, the person. I think it, and so, I don't know, if your life is full of fulfillment, and, like, you've done everything you've wanted to do, you would welcome death. You'd be like, there's nothing more that I have that I would like to achieve in this life. I've done all of the things I want. And I think you wouldn't accept death as good or bad. You would just accept it as the end goal, essentially. Because all things, let's be honest, all things come to an end, whether we know it or not. Eventually, something will die out, it'll be eaten, or the world will end. Like, it'll happen. Whether or not it'll be in our time or in the future, it will happen.
All the energy in the universe will just end eventually.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right. Whether or not the actual question is death bad, I'm gonna have to say no. Doesn't matter who death is bad for. Eventually, everyone comes to terms with it. If you die, your family, yes, they're gonna grieve and they're gonna weep for you. They're gonna weep for the loss of your life and everything that you had yet to accomplish, or everything that you have accomplished but didn't finish. But I think as the years go on, they will come to terms with the fact that if they look back on your past and everything that you've done, and like your happiest moments, they will come to terms with the fact that you lived the life you wanted to live. You've reached the end, which is death. So I think, in terms of whether or not death is good or bad, I don't think you can really quantify it. I think it would more just be the end goal, the end mission of whatever it is.
Now I have two different questions on that. So the first one it's related to this question. Have you ever read the book or the book series Scythe?
No, I have not.
It's one where aging and like death has been cured. So like you can't die via natural means. You can only die by fire or by someone.
But you can die by suicide.
No. Well, if you set yourself on fire, yes, but
so it can only be through fire.
Through fire, and then one other method that I can't remember. But like death is very much unnatural. Is death bad then?
No, I think death would be a welcome release. You're essentially immortal in most aspects of the word, except for two different instances, as you pointed out. But you'd get tired of it. Nothing would grow. Everything would stay the same. Life, as you would know it, would be at a standstill. The only difference is that new life, if I'm not mistaken, can continue to be born. But at that point, why does it even matter? They're just going to grow up, and they won't age after a certain point. They'll literally, everybody and anybody can do whatever they want, no consequences, and then they can just move on as though it never even happened 100 years down the line. I think after a certain point, everybody will have to die. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think...
the heat death.
Yes, obviously. But yes, no, I don't think death is bad in that sense. I think it is the ultimate pleasure. It is the ultimate reward for being an immortal person. Because you see so much...
Yeah, I would agree.
Like,
eventually,
darkness.
with immortality, even, like, if you have a time machine and, like, can do literally whatever you want, immortality will always get tired.
Yes, you will be bored very fast.
I would see death... I think society would see death as, very bad in that case. Because you would know either something went wrong or people, like, forced the death to happen. And then on that note, what do you think of intentional killing? Is that death bad? Because before you were saying people would be proud of the accomplishments and the work that was worked on yet not finished and stuff like that. But what if it was purposely, or maybe perhaps, just a random drive-by shooting? Like, what about that? Is that still neutral, or is that bad?
Okay, now in that case, well, as I said earlier, you can't really quantify death as good or bad. It's more of the actions behind it, whether or not it's like with good intentions or ill will. In that case, you're forcibly taking away a life. At that point, it would be not death that is bad, but the actions that caused it to happen bad. The whole circumstance bad, because that whole life was ripped out of that person's hands. There was nothing they could do about it. There's no sort of preparation kind of thing. You always hear stories about people who are like on their deathbeds. They receive like a final moment of clarity and so forth before they do depart. Yeah. Whereas in these cases, you don't know what's going to happen. Like 1 minute you're alive, next minute, boom, you're gone.
So, just to sum up this conversation, death is not necessarily bad.
You can't quantify it.
You can't quantify it.
But you can quantify the circumstances.
Yeah. The circumstances... Natural death is a good death for circumstances.
Yes.
Otherwise, is normally a bad death circumstances-wise. And if there's some way to prevent almost all death / immortality, death is welcome, if still neutral.
Correct.
All right. To end up this podcast today, how about we talk about something a bit lighter? For example, are lizards cute like mammals? Why or why not? I think this heavily depends on
this question.
I don't know. It was on debate.org for philosophical topics. Do you want to do it or not?
Are lizards cute like mammals? I mean,
I think it depends on the lizard. Like, there are some pretty cute snakes.
Yeah.
Those aren't lizards, but whatever.
I don't know. I mean, like...
You don't know?
No, I think it's... There's some mammals out there that aren't even cute, man. There's, like, some disgusting animals out there that are just like, why? Why do you exist?
Did you know wombats can twerk their enemies to death?
That is the best skill in the world, bro. I'm gonna be on. That's amazing.
Find out more at factfiend.com. We're not affiliated with them, but they're pretty cool.
Yeah, no, there's no way. I personally am gonna say lizards aren't cute, but then again, are not. But then again, I've never had a lizard, and I haven't seen that many lizards either. I would think lizards are dope and they're absolutely amazing, especially
they're more cool than cute.
They're more cool and amazing than cute, especially I don't remember the name of the lizard, but there's a lizard that can just sprint.
Lizard?
Yes, that can just sprint across water like it's him walking. And he's like the fastest lizard on water or whatever. That's amazing to see.
I would agree. I would kind of correct me if I'm wrong when I kind of try to sum up what you're saying, but I would say that on average, mammals are cuter. There are some outliers, but also then lizards' cuteness. But I feel that some lizards are cute, but on a scale of coolness, lizards are cooler than the average mammal.
Yes.
All right. This has been Aristotle's Playground with your hosts, Mr. Blockhead and
Joker.